My name is Mike Lesko. I'm Deputy Assistant Director of the Texas Department of Public Safety for the Law Enforcement Support Division, specifically over crime records. In my capacity there, I oversee the automated fingerprint identification system, the computerized criminal history system, the sex offender registration system, Tex Gang, NCIC, which is National Crime Information Center, and TCIC, the Texas Crime Information Center, as well as uniform crime reporting in the state. In addition to my state duties, I serve on the FBI's Advisory Policy Board. I chair their Identification Services Subcommittee. I also serve on the Compact Council, which is the National Privacy and Compact Council, which is charged with the dissemination of criminal justice data for non-criminal justice purposes, specifically for applicant screening. So that is my background.
Go ahead and start. You have 5 minutes, sir.
I was asked to come and talk specifically about the differences between fingerprint checks and name-based checks. And when you're doing a background check, the very most important thing is to have proper identification so you know who you're actually talking about and whose criminal history that you're looking at. That can only be achieved through fingerprint checks. Name checks cannot do that because names, the way that they're set up for name checks, it takes into the premise that an individual that's applying for a job or conducting one of these name checks is using the same name on their application that they did when they were arrested. And that's a very bad premise because in the law enforcement community, we have seen that criminals have a tendency to lie. And I know it comes as a shock, but that does happen. And unless an individual commits a crime in a jurisdiction and uses that same name on an application, you're not going to miss him, or you will miss him. Additional problems with name checks are false positives. Because a lot of common names are available, an individual applicant could have, as a basis of a name check, incorrect information brought against him because it's not him, because it was a common name. More importantly, or more drastic, is the false negatives. That's where an individual goes in, he does have a criminal history, but because of a name check, that name, it does not come up, and the individual is subsequently exposed to vulnerable populations. This is a real fact. The FBI did a name check efficacy report where they take over 690,000 individuals and ran their fingerprints and ran their names in a parallel format and found that 11.7% of the individuals that hit on fingerprints did not hit on name checks. These individuals would have been put in positions of trust or involved with vulnerable populations. So name checks are not good in establishing the individual's identity. Additionally, name checks do not serve to protect the privacy of individuals that are not the subject of the check. Because there's going to be multiple names coming back, and that name needs to be adjudicated to determine if it is potentially the individual of the application, you're exposing criminal history of other people that don't belong in the applicant process. Finally, what we don't have with name checks is a relief from disability program. With both the federal and the state level, and when you do a fingerprint check and you say that's not me, you have an avenue to challenge the record, not only about the identification, but also the content of the criminal history information. With name checks, you do not have that ability because it's simply a name check. There's no way to prove up it's not you. So we have those individual issues there. Once we get past the identification, it's a question of where is the source of the data. With name-based checks, it's unclear where this data comes from. It's basically data aggregators that will go to courthouses, PDs, police departments, and sheriff's offices, some state agencies, and gather this data and put it together. We have seen issues in the past with name checks where they misaggregate data, where my information may be aggregated with another individual of the same name and presented as mine. So we have that issue. With Texas, we have access to all the information in the computerized criminal history system. That information, by Chapter 60 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, includes all arrests in the state of Texas that are Class B misdemeanors and greater. At this time, we're talking about 8,700,000 individuals that are responsible for 22,944,000 arrests, of which there's 26 million charges. We also have over 19 million, almost 20 million dispositions from the courts in our computerized criminal history system. Additionally, Fingerprints allow access to the federal database. You are not allowed to do a name-based check against the federal database for non-criminal justice purposes. At the FBI, there's over 70 million individual records that are available for the folks to be able to adjudicate against. In addition, at both the state and the federal level, you have access to individual sex offender registration records done by fingerprints, so we know that it is the individual in question. One other part about the data itself is the timeliness of the data. As I said before, data aggregators that do name checks have to go to all the different places and sources of data, which takes a while for them to get and subsequently aggregate. With the records at the federal and the state level, the updates are near real time. The individuals arrested, we have live scan devices in the state of Texas. Over 95% of our arrests come in via live scan, which means the individual is arrested.
You can go ahead and finish your thought.
They're rolled in and being able to provide that information quickly. Finally, with fingerprints, you have the ability to do what we call wrap back, where we can retain those fingerprints, and if the individual offends again in the future, you can be notified of that offense, which is also beneficial for the applicant themselves because they don't have to go and get continually vetted on a monthly, weekly, yearly basis. It provides a service for them as well.
When you're talking about name checks, just so we understand, when someone submits a Social Security number, or I forget the other example that Councilmember Zimmerman was bringing forward, the other documentation, tell us how that works. Is that not a name check?
It is. It just supplements a name check to try to provide additional bona fides for the actual check itself. But we have seen, and I testified at the state legislature on this very same topic, and at the time we had a particular Uber case where an individual picked up a young lady and she couldn't remember where she was going home, so he conveniently took her to his place where he sexually assaulted her. When we looked at the criminal history of the individual that was available, he had individual arrests that were disqualifying but were not seen because they were not available through a name-based check. They were only available through a fingerprint check to authorized entities.